trying to squeeze evolution into the Bible by saying this is what God did. And you know what? Plate tectonics is the same thing, that neither one has biblical support.
Intelligent design and DNA. Scholars can't explain it all away. Get ready to be awed by the handiwork of God. Tune into Real Science Radio. Turn up the Real Science Radio. Keeping it real.
Welcome to the brightest audience in the country. This is Real Science Radio. I'm Fred Williams.
And I'm Doug McBurney. Fred, this week, I want to welcome Brian Lauer, creation speaker and evangelist. Brian, I was out. I was otherwise engaged. I missed the whole Hydroplate Week of Celebration. We have to have you give us an update on what happened with celebrating the work of Walt Brown and the hydroplate theory. Welcome to Real Science Radio, Brian Lauer.
Well, thank you, Doug. And just for your benefit, you can see everything at a YouTube channel. We got it all recorded, and it's Hydroplate Week of Celebration. That's the YouTube channel. You can see the whole night, every night. We took the interviews and we clipped them so you can listen to specific interviews. And then we even made highlights of that. And during this process, and I encourage people, if you can only listen to one, listen to Pastor Kevin Lee's, because he went through, because the main thing I wanted to do is just honor Walt Brown. And that's by getting this theory into the next generation. Because if we fail at that, all his work is just going to go fade into history. And we can't count on the secular scientists to do it. And tragically, even right now, we can't count on the creation scientists to do it. So this is a grassroots movement that we need to do. And it's a lot of fun. And then the other thing was I wanted to give people an opportunity to think about flood models. Because if you need to see two sides if you want to think, but that's not happening. And that's what the blind chancers do at the Big Bang and evolution. They just teach one perspective as dogma, so people just memorize and conform instead of think. And as Christians, we should have a higher standard than that. If there's two models out there, put them out there, and then people can come to their own conclusion. And what we have is, it's like that saying, beware of one hand clapping. There's two sides to every story. And if you only see one side over and over being taught as dogma, which is what's happening in the flood models in the creation museums, it's probably because the truth is being censored by those who can do it. And then the third goal for the Week of Celebration was to throw out the hydroplate protocol. Walt Brown says that before a paper gets published, they should have a list of predictions. If their ideas are right, this is what we should suspect to happen in the future. Yeah. And that's the hydroplate protocol. And if it's a Christian one, it should be show your biblical support. And the hydroplate theory has so much more biblical support than the catastrophic plate tectonic theory. And I'm looking at it and it's like, the plate tectonics, that's on the same level as evolution. People are trying to squeeze evolution into the Bible by saying this is what God did. And what? Plate tectonics is the same thing, that neither one has biblical support. And yet we're trying to squeeze that into the Bible by speeding it up.
Brian,
that we should
wait a
use
second.
Bible verses. Yeah.
I don't think that's ever been said in public. A catastrophic plate tectonics is on par with, what did you say?
I said plate tectonics is on the same level as evolution. So catastrophic plate tectonics, that's on the same level as theistic evolution.
No. Okay. So have you copyrighted that line? Because I want to steal that one, but I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that. But boy, I'll tell you what, you can't put a finer point on it than what you just said. It really is on the same level. And we're going to get to a comment that was made on Facebook by a supporter of catastrophic plate tectonics that's going to prove your point that it's on the same level. So Fred, get that over to the copyright office.
I'm on my way.
We want to make sure that RSR Media has all rights to that line. Catastrophic plate tectonics equals evolution.
And so for those just joining,
there's just as much biblical support for either one.
Yep.
And
So for those who are not familiar, just joining our growing YouTube audience, and of course, we're on KLTT in Denver every Friday at 12:30 p.m. prime time noon slot. Dr. Walt Brown is what Bob Enyart referred to as the Sir Isaac Newton of this century. and a lot of people don't know about him, but he's got this flood model called the hydroplate theory. And it's, in my opinion, by far the best flood model. The competing model is catastrophic plate tectonics. So those are the two main ones that creationists have debated over the years. They used to be the canopy theory that almost all creationists believed. And it turned out Walt Brown was the first one to come along and say, well, this one has serious problems. And it kind of got him in hot water with some of the other creationists at the time. That's a whole nother story in itself. So then over time, this hydroplate theory got developed, and this other theory, catastrophic plate tectonics, was also developed in parallel. And one of the comments Bob wrote down at an ICC conference in the past was the developer of the catastrophic plate tectonics, Dr. John Baumgardner. He said that he wanted to get plate tectonics into the Bible. Doesn't that sound familiar? I want to get millions of years. Now, he didn't say millions of years, but what about the theistic evolutionists who say, I want to get millions of years into the Bible? Well, guess what? Plate tectonics is a millions of years paradigm. No question about it. It's an old earth paradigm, and that's why the secular world loves it. And Brian, the wisdom of the world is foolishness to somebody, right?
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, no doubt. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
Yes. And by the way, Fred, the catastrophic plate tectonics model of Noah's flood and the events there are surrounding Noah's flood was really not developed in, I'm trying to remember exactly how you just said it, in parallel with the hydroplate theory. I would say that the catastrophic plate tectonics was really developed in parallel with the plate tectonics theory as it evolved. Walt Brown, as far as I am aware, Walt Brown developed his theory really in parallel with the Bible, mostly, which has always been the most attractive feature for me for the hydroplate theory, is the line after line after line of biblical support, verses from the Bible. At the front of the book, when I first read it, I was like, wow. I mean, I had never looked at it this way, and it just really, it points even an uninitiated, unbelieving reader who picks up that book and looks at those verses, you've just pointed them toward the Creator, which is the first step towards saving them from condemnation. And it's just been a blessing, the hydroplate theory, because of that biblical support. So I don't want to give the CPT guys any association with hydroplate theory, because it's too closely related to the Bible, and CPT is it's just out there.
And the thing is, they were developing plate tectonics, and they didn't know what was in the ocean. I was reading Walt Brown. There's on that audiobook, that Week of Celebration, I'm reading some of Walt's stuff. And one of them is that how plate tectonics doesn't work. And he quotes from F. Christian Smoot. And he basically says this. He's the guy, this F. Christian Smoot. He mapped the ocean floor. And then he said it doesn't work. And he wrote this tectonic globaloney. And that's
he was
what
a believer in
took that secular model and sped it up.
Yeah, he was actually a believer in plate tectonics, and he worked for the U.S. Navy. He went and he was mapping out the ocean floor for the U.S. Navy, and it's all classified stuff at the time. And as time went on, he's like, wow, this isn't matching what plate tectonics should be here. Okay, well, maybe it's going to work over here. Oh, I just mapped this part here too. Nothing. There's nothing that's supporting plate tectonics. And so none of the predictions of plate tectonics came true, were bore about. And so this Christian Smoot, he wrote this book. What's the title of that book, Brian?
It's Tectonic Globaloney, Closing Arguments.
Yeah.
Tectonic Globaloney.
He's become a staunch critic of plate tectonics based on observation of what he saw on the ocean floor.
Yeah, and Walt Brown, in the new edition, they talk about this. I forget what page is on, but we're reading about it. Subduction doesn't work. We read about that. And you can see this stuff. If you like audio books, you go into Week of Celebration, and then under In the Beginning by Walt Brown, and we're dropping one every day. So people can get their In the Beginning fix when they get their Bible fix in the mornings or whenever.
Oh, very nice. Now, wait a second now. Before you do that, or maybe after you do that, if you get a little taste, a little tease, we want to encourage you here at Real Science Radio to go to realscienceradio.com, rsr.org, and pre-order In the Beginning, the 9th edition. We will be shipping it very shortly, and you can special order it at a special price. I think, Fred, we're charging 3 times the retail so that you can help support Real Science Radio. No, we're not charging 3 times retail, but we have a special introductory pre-order price. Get the 9th edition, order it. We'll put the link down in the description on YouTube. And of course, it'll be at rsr.org. In the Beginning, 9.0. That's how we say it now. We don't say 9th edition anymore. It's 9G maybe. Is that how we say it now? 9G? Anyway, the 9th edition will be available for pre-order, is available now for pre-order at Real Science Radio.
And that's store.rsr.org if you want a direct link. Store.rsr.org.
No, that's it. Store.rsr.org. Store.rsr.org.
But you can go to rsr.org and just click on the store.
And what's really a blessing is they make the flip book available. And you can see that at hpt.rsr.org. At least I could yesterday. I couldn't today, but Fred can. And then also at creationsciencecenter.org. You'll be able to get that, look at it. But I encourage people to get the book because I was at Christmas and this book was on the couch. I was playing a game and it was on the couch. And my sister-in-law says, "Hey, is this your book?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "It has the answers." And I said, "Yeah, I know." And she says, I love science, but she got kicked out of youth group when she was in 6th grade because she asked about dinosaurs. And this is the third time that personal experiences where people, I said, "Well, what did they say when you asked about dinosaurs?" And they said, "Your questions are hurting the faith of the students." So they kicked her out. And this is the third time that dinosaurs have been confusing people. So we really have to button that up in the churches.
Well, Brian, that's you bring up a great point because a lot of Christians look at dinosaurs as a threat.
Right.
They should be our friend.
Right. And so I explained, it's like, hey, dinosaurs are land animals made on day 6. 2 of every kind got on the ark. They were small, so they could get in the door. They got off, and people called them dragons. And when I said dragons, you could see the light bulbs go on. And then I said, and people killed them and carved them in castles and temples. And yeah, they lived with people. And that's where we're really dropping the ball with the church. We have to get that on ours. We have to help people really understand what dinosaurs is. But this Hydroplate book, and that's, one of the highlights of the Week of Celebration is I interviewed Bill Wells. I was like a kid in a candy store. All these people who knew Walt and had all these experiences, and he's a jet fighter pilot. And he says, when he was a pilot, he was trained to use the weapons offensive and defensive, and he had total confidence in each of them. And he says, this hydroplate theory is an incredible weapon for evangelism, for apologetics. And we're putting people out in the battlefield and they're not equipped. He says, we need to equip them with the hydroplate theory so they can, when they start talking about the evolutionists and the Big Bang, it's like, well, hey, what predictions have you made? And so we can go on the offense and the defense if this gets out there. And once the hydroplate theory gets out there, I think the Big Bang's done because the hydroplate makes the predictions that they're finding in comets and asteroids. And Pastor Kevin Lee is so good at explaining that. And he's going to be going full time in this. He's going to have HPTuniversity.com, I think. And so as soon as that book gets out there, he's going to hit the ground running. And that's what we need to do. We need to gain as much ground as we can with the limited number of days we have here on Earth. And so it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a big adventure. We're going to do the Hydroplate Theory Week of Celebration again next year. It'll be a week before Thanksgiving, so people can do their Christmas shopping. They can get their merch that says all scientists work for Walt Brown. Here's some mugs that, it's like never underestimate the power of supercritical water, and just to get this into the mainstream.
So, Brian,
so then you can spend your Christmas money in God's kingdom instead of the world's kingdom. So then we're going to be doing this again, and I'm going to be interviewing people, and I'd like to throw out this. We're going to do a decentralized creation ministry. We're sick and tired of waiting for the gatekeepers to tell us what we can and cannot think about. And so we're going to have a decentralized one, and we're going to interview people. It's like, hey, what progress have we made? But it was so much fun. And then the other thing that came from that hydroplate theory was, why is a theory that's making accurate predictions censored? I just can't wrap my hand around that. The creation organizations do not do it. And what came out about this was, it's a scandal, really. If you go into Hydroplate Week of Celebration and just search blackballed, there's a clip from Pastor Kevin Lee's talk it's titled, "Why Was Walt Brown Blackballed?" And he says some plagiarism, that was in the past. And what I found out too was those documents are available. So you can see the letters, because Walt Brown, he had the Grand Canyon experiment. He figured out that Grand Lake was the one that breathed to form Grand Canyon. And somebody took that lake and said that, and he started teaching it. And Walt thought, that's a compliment. They're using my work. Right. And then they started to say that, and then people would say, well, that's Walt Brown's work. And then the geologist said, well, Walt Brown stole it from me. And then he even let that go for a year or so. But then at Robert Gentry, they were going to make a hydroplate movie. And somebody said, insinuated that Walt Brown plagiarized it. And so then Walt had to act. Wow. And so then he said, he went to the geologist, and you can see these letters. Go into hydroplate.org, go into hydroplate resources or something, and you go down and it's hydroplate controversy. Right. And you can go there and you can click the documents page, or HPT doc links, I think it is. And then you can see every one of the documents in chronological order.
Well, so Brian, because
who wrote what and when.
Okay, well, without documents, this just sounds like a soap opera and a he said, she said, but you said this is all documented.
Yep.
Okay, now I want to get back to you just made a point about a decentralized creationist movement and
ministry.
It just reminds me, speaking of ministry, when the Apostle Paul founded churches across Turkey and Greece, he didn't set up a diocese. He didn't set up an office in Rome to run everything. He just set up local small churches run by local men who believed the gospel and loved the Lord. And creationism, everything associated with Christianity really has followed that pattern since the Apostle Paul. Creationism, unfortunately, there is an archdiocese involved, apparently, in creationism. I want to go to quickly, Answers in Genesis posted a couple of weeks ago. They posted a beautiful graphic of a hand holding a Bible, and it says, churches should stand on the Bible, not feelings. That's Answers in Genesis, to which everybody said, can I get an amen? And everybody said amen, right? Churches should stand on the Bible, not feelings. And then Brian Lauer, BC Lauer, whoever this guy is, he posts up on Facebook, churches should also reject secular ideas like evolution and plate tectonics. Why is a biblical theory that makes accurate predictions ignored? And then you post up a link to the YouTube for Hydroplate. First of all, just thank you for doing that, because, Answers in Genesis gets a lot of eyeballs being a part of the archdiocese up there. And so that was really nice that you brought people's attention to hydroplate theory. But then an interloper posted, a Nate Loper, I got that wrong. He posts up in response to you. He says, just a heads up, for anyone unfamiliar with young Earth creation beliefs, nearly all creationists believe in plate tectonics, as do the geologists and scientists who work for the leading creation organizations. Mr. Lauer does not speak on behalf of the creation community, and we do not support such fringe theories. Neither does Answer in Genesis support the idea of hydroplate theory for its many scientific problems and overstatement of claims. Unquote. Mr. Loper, methinks thou doth protesteth too much. If Mr. Lauer's assertion is relatively ridiculous and rejected by how many? Nearly all young Earth creationists. Well, why pay any attention to it at all? Why not just move on, Mr. Loper? But he doesn't move on, does he? He has to stop and make an appeal to authority, which I think we all learned in 9th grade debate that's a mistake. You can't just say everybody believes this, because that means you don't remember 9th grade debate. Maybe Mr. Loper forgot about 9th grade debate rules while he was off at college studying dirt shamanism, which that's what I call geology. He's a dirt shaman. He pretends he knows a bunch of stuff about the dirt, when actually what geologists know about the dirt goes down about 6, maybe 18 inches on a good day. After that, it's pretty much all guesswork and shaman. They might as well be shaking chicken bones. And so, Brian, I had to respond to the interloper. To Nate Loper, and I'll let folks go to the Answers in Genesis page. I don't know how you refer someone to a Facebook post. Maybe should I read it?
What's the date? Does it have the date on it?
I just responded right before. I just responded. It was a couple of weeks ago. Not
It's
long
December
after
30th.
you.
December 30th, 2025 at 5 p.m. If you find that on the Answers in Genesis timeline.
All right. Well, I just called Mr. Loper out for his appeal to authority, and haven't heard back from him yet, but hopefully I will. And if I do, I'll update folks. But when you throw a rock into a pack of dogs, the one that yelps is the one that got hit. And that's what Mr. Loper reminds me of. Because, when I'm discussing Christianity, the gospel, creationism on Facebook, and somebody says something really dumb and they're nobody, I don't stop and respond. I just move on, and I discuss things with people who have something to offer, who at least seem intelligent and informed on the subject. But Mr. Loper couldn't let your post just sit. He had to
and
respond.
apparently he speaks for the creation community. Apparently,
that's what.
So apparently he does. I don't remember voting for him, but apparently he's got the infallibility of the creation movement. We all have to need to listen to him. And I disagree. I disagree. Let us think. If there's two theories out there, put them both up there so people can think. And I'm putting a challenge out there to all the creation museums and organizations. Who's going to be the one that does that first? Who's going to be the one that says, yeah, two theories, let's let them both out there. And then you come to your conclusion instead of picking one and treating it as dogma, you can't question it. And then the other one, you'd call it fringe. And you notice he never did answer my question. Why is a theory that's making accurate predictions ignored?
Wait a second. Let me. He said he did answer that.
By appeal to authority.
Well, there was the appeal to authority was his first answer, and then his second answer was what's called ad hominem, because he said it was a fringe theory.
Right. Well, my next question, in my comment, I asked him, well, what predictions does CPT make? And I asked the guy who made the model, he's probably the biggest CPT guy out there. What predictions do you make? What ones were accurate? What biblical support do you have? And he said they didn't make predictions. And his biblical support was Genesis 6, 7, and 8, which is the flood. Okay. Well, that doesn't distinguish it from anybody else's.
Just to throw this in there, they believe in the fountains of the great magma, right? Now, when you hear the fountains of the great deep, do you think water or do you think lava?
Right.
And
Pete, he did a talk down in Houston, and he just clearly shows how fountains always refer to water in the Bible. Always, not magma. And yet they're taking that secular model and they're trying to squeeze it into the Bible, just like, evolution. And I think that it's time for the decentralized creation movement to stand up and say, no, we're going to think on this ourselves. And I think if people start asking more questions at the museums and at speakers and posting on their boards and getting informed and informing others, I think this can be the battering ram that leads us out of the dark ages of consensus science. That's
we got all of this. Hold on, we got to copyright that one.
Neil
battering ram. Did you say? I love that.
If it's not consensus science, it's not science. It's not true. And that's kind of what's happening here. But Brian, I wanted to get back to something too. You said you're making an interesting claim that a flood model is refuting the Big Bang. Now that's pretty interesting. How does a flood model, a model that has to do with the fountains of the great deep, creating a whole bunch of water that floods the earth, you get all kinds of sediment, we get all kinds of fossils buried all over the place, in many cases miles deep sediment. A flood model, how is that refuting the Big Bang? And that's where, of course, I already know the answer. And this is where I love the hydroplate theory because of what it does in outer space. So expand on that.
And Pastor Kevin Lee is so good at showing what NASA finds and then shows how it's not possible. Like there's one, they found a strange moon going around this Demetrius or whatever. And he says, and it's a contact binary. He says, impossible. Impossible. And then he's got a quote from one of the NASA scientists. We're going to have fun trying to figure this out. And he goes, no, you're not. You're never going to figure it out unless you accept the hydroplate theory. Yeah, and so there's so many things that are just impossible with the Big Bang, and that the hydroplate theory is making accurate predictions, like what they'd find in a comet, what they'd find in an asteroid. And now NASA discoveries are finding stuff from Earth out there, but they won't think it came from Earth. It's some, watery planet billions of years ago. And so, yeah, I think I'm really excited. People should sign up for that HPT University. I think it's .com or .org. And that's going to be Pastor Kevin Lee. And that's what we really need. We need to get all that expertise recorded, and then we can destroy the Big Bang.
Well, a lot of people, they really get into the lottery. Now, I've never bought a lotto ticket that I know of. Maybe I did a scratch thing once, because if you're really into that, you're bad at math. I'm sorry.
Yes. Yeah.
So, but
it's a tax on people that can't do math.
We know a famous person, and he won a huge lottery. And that's astronaut Alan Shepard. He won the Earth rock lottery, didn't he? He found an Earth rock on the moon that came from 20 kilometers beneath the Earth's surface, according to NASA, from a watery environment. That's where it came from. 20 miles beneath the Earth, or 20 kilometers, watery environment from Earth, and it's on the moon. And so Alan Shepard found that one rock. He won the Earth rock lottery. Or maybe there's a whole bunch of other rocks on the moon, how the moon is pockmarked on the fronts on the near side, which is a testimony in itself that a whole bunch of material came from somewhere. Where would that come from? Maybe the nearby planet that it's orbiting. And it shot
the one made of water?
Yeah. Yeah, a watery planet. And all this rock ends up on the moon. And guess what? There's more than one rock, because Alan Shepard, didn't win the Earth rock lottery. He found one of many rocks that came back from the moon. And that's always been one of my favorite arguments for the hydroplate.
Yes.
theory.
Oh, and by the way, Brian, before you go on, just to correct the record and make it clear, because it points to yet another one of Kevin Lee's brilliant observations regarding hydroplate theory. The contact binary is Itokawa that he was discussing, not to be confused with Dimorphos, which was the one that Kevin predicted would be confirmed to be a floating rock pile, which it was in real time, on film, on camera, in front of God and everybody. We all saw it. Just so everybody's clear on those.
Yeah. So NASA's just throwing billions of dollars down the tube because they got the wrong perspective of the past. If they'd listened to Pastor Lee, and he warned them that a DART mission, when they redirect an asteroid, it'd work if it's a solid rock, but he said it'll fail if it's a bunch of boulders, and it turns out to be a bunch of boulders. And so they got the wrong perspective of the past, and we have the right perspective of the past. But, you're talking about the moon rock. They don't put that in the textbooks. I went through the 2024 textbooks, and it said that the Earth's oldest rock was found by Hudson Bay in 2008, when actually in 2019, NASA said that Earth's oldest rock was found on the moon. We need the truth. If we would unite around the truth, I think that we could make a big impact. When you read those documents, the controversy documents, Walt Brown did a summary of the mediation, that he explains what happened there. And in one part, he talks about the book, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, or something like that. And he said that there's 3 stages of maturity.
Hey, we're running out of time in this broadcast, so go to our website to catch the rest of this program, realscienceradio.com.
Intelligent design and DNA. Scholars can't explain it all away. Get ready to be awed by the handiwork of God. Tune into Real Science Radio. Turn up the Real Science Radio. Keeping it real. That's what I'm talking about.
Real Science Radio is sponsored by RSR Media.
Is your office ready for a new copier? Business Equipment Service has